everyone, my name is Drew Staples and today I'm going to be talking to you all about casting in Python. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go ahead and check out my previous videos where I talk about the common data types of Python. Now there are many different data types, but essentially the four main ones you'll be working with, at least the most common ones, are strings, floats, integers, and booleans. Okay, so those are very common data types that you'll be working with, and with what casting allows you to do is convert one data type into another data type, and so that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do today. So as you can see here, I have some comments, I have some coding blocks already here. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up Google Colab, open up some coding blocks. That way you guys can code along with me, okay? So with casting, like I said, there's mainly four common data types. Unfortunately, though, we are not able to convert any of those data types into a Boolean. So there is no function, at least that I know of, for that yet. But we are grateful enough to where we actually can get any of those four data types and convert them into a string, into a float, or into an integer. At least most of the time. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be making some variables, and I'm going to be showing you what can be translated into a string and what can't, along with what can be converted into a float and what can't, and the same thing with integer. Okay, so let's go ahead and make some variables. So if you want, you can make your own variables or just make the same ones I am. Actually, I'll type in do int. So I'm just making some random variables of different data types. So I'll make an integer variable, I'll do a floating point variable, I'll do a so since actually, no, never mind. Just forget what I just said. I was thinking about the next section. And so then we got Boolean. So we have an integer, we have a floating point number, and we have a Boolean. Now, and with the string function, we can actually convert these different data types into a string. So let's go ahead and try that out. So string is our function. So if you see, I have it in the comments right here. So string is our function. So let's go ahead and just type in our variable name right inside there. Shift enter, and you see that we have a 9, but this 9 is now a string. It is not an integer. So this is an integer, and so this would be a string. And if you are a little bit confused about knowing the different data types, you can always just type in the type function. And type that around the string function. Hit shift enter, and you'll see that this is now a string. So there you go, str. So if you type in all your variable names and you wrap it in the string function, you'll see that all your new variables, or all the variables that you just made, are now strings. So there you go. String, string, and didn't put the string method around that one. String. Awesome. Okay, let's go to the next one now. Now we are going to be converting those data types into floating point numbers now. So again, let's go ahead and make some variables. Do via int 5. We'll do via. Now, what I'm going to be doing as well too is I'm going to be showing you some different different data types kind of mixed, embedded with each other. I guess it's best to just show you what I mean, but essentially I'm just going to be making some strings but putting in integers and floating point numbers in there just to show you what the float function can do. Okay, so we'll make this true. So that's our Boolean. So we have an integer, we have a Boolean. Now let's do via string. we'll just do Python via string int. So this is a string, but we're going to put a 9 inside of there, okay? So that technically is still a string. Via string, yeah, via string float. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I was just referencing my notes really quick. So if we go ahead and put the float function, type the float function, so float with parentheses, and type in our variable name. Let's see what comes out. So our first variable, we took via int, so our integer, and converted that to a floating point, so 5.0. Awesome, and that's what we want. Let's do the next one now. All right, so beginners might be a little bit confused by this. Why this Boolean variable translated into a 1.0? So obviously if it is a float, it is going to be a decimal number, so it's going to be point something, okay? With Booleans, how Booleans are true or false values, but how they can be translated into a numerical input is 1 or a 0. So if it's true, it's a 1. If it's 0, it's false. So that is how these can be translated into numerical values. So if since you wrap this around a float, since it's true, that is a 1, but since you wrapped it around the float function, you have a 1.0. So let's try out the next one now. String. Now the reason why this doesn't work is you see we have a value error, could not convert string to a float, Python. So this value error is just saying that this value, this Python value, that's our error right there. And the reason why is because this can't be converted into a float. Now a beginner might think, well, in my mind that this just means, like, if I wanted to find the float of this, then that might mean the length. So in that case, you would just need to, instead of the float function, you would actually just type in len, which is short for length, shift enter, and then look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 characters in your Python variable. So that's what you get there. And then obviously you could put a float function around the length, so you can get 6.0 if you wanted to do that. So let's try the next one. So it works out perfectly. We got 9.0. So this is pretty cool because this is an integer inside of a string. So we're actually pretty lucky here. We don't actually have to convert this into an integer first and then convert it into a float. We are lucky enough, we are fortunate enough to where we can just wrap a float around this right here, around this variable right here, and we could just get the 9.0 straight up. And let's try the last one. And as you can see, it converts this into its into a floating point number. So it just gets rid of these quotes around it. And like I said, if you're ever confused or if you're ever uncertain about it, I just definitely encourage you just code the type function around it, and you'll see that it's a floating point number. Okay, so last one. Let's go ahead and make some more variables. So we'll do via bool. So that first one is our Boolean. Second one is our floating point number. And then we'll do via string. Coding. And kind of like from before, we'll put some integers and floats within the strings too. So we'll do 5. So that'll be our integer inside of our string. Okay, so if we go ahead and type our int function and just put in our variable name, let's see what we get. Okay, so you see we got a 0 there. So with integers, you remember from the last video, with integers, it's just a whole number with floating points. That's decimal numbers, okay? So it's going to be a 0 or a 1 if you wrap the integer function around it. So, and remember what I said before, with booleans, it's a 1 or a 0. It's a true or it's a false. Okay, so integer, if we wrap integer around here, around this variable now, you see that we get 6. So, and then you might notice that this doesn't actually, this always rounds down. So if I had, even if I had 6.92, it's still going to be a 6. So if I really wanted to like find out that that answer, what I would do is I would actually type in the round function. So the round function, if you put that around the variable, it'll round it to, you know, whatever it's closest to, whatever whole number it's closest to, okay? So a lot of cool functions and methods and attributes within Python. It's an amazing language that could do a lot of things. Not to get off topic though, let's get to the rest of the variables. So we got via string. So you see that this is the same thing as we had before. We have a value error. So this coding variable is the error, or this coding value is the error. Okay, because it can't take the count, it can't take the length of this, if that's what you actually meant to do. So it's just the same thing. Just type in length, len. And that would get you your length if that's what you're trying to do. But you can't, this is not a number, so you can't actually convert this into a number as much as you might want to. Okay, so now I typed in this one next, our via string int, which is a 5. So that's a string. It's an integer inside of a string, but technically a string. And then we're able to convert that into a 5. So just to reiterate right before, when we talked about these floats, you remember that I was able to type float via string int. So I just put this variable inside of this float function, and I was able to get a 9.0. So this is an integer inside of a string, and I was able to literally just convert it straight up into a float without even converting it into an integer first. Now watch this. Now if I type in this last one, if I try to do the exact opposite, convert a floating point number inside of a string and convert that into an integer, when I hit Shift Enter, we should be seeing an error. So yes, it's the same thing. So we are not fortunate enough to where we can actually convert this into an integer right away. The way that this would need to work, if we wanted to convert this into an integer, we would first need to convert it into a floating point number. And then, so I'm gonna hit Shift Enter just so you can see it. So and now this is an integer now, or this is a floating point number now. So you see you have no quotes around it. And then, like I said, you can always put the type function around it just to make sure of it. And then what you would do after that is you would put the int function around this now. And so it takes that floating point number and converts it into an integer. Okay? So some of the main things, at least I can't speak from all the different perspectives of what Python can do, but I at least know from a data perspective. You're going to be dealing with many different sorts of data types. When you're dealing with data sets and you have these different columns of data, and you need to convert them into something else to perform some sort of computation on them. So, like, for example, you might get a series of strings that are of integers that are encapsulated in strings, so they will be strings, and you need them in order to perform some sort of mathematical output on them. You need to convert these into integers or floats. So that's where this casting comes in and plays a big role and helps out a lot with that. Okay, so it's just another step in helping you manipulate your data into getting the right result that you want to get. Okay, so I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and I will see you in the next video, okay? Goodbye.